Lynched on CTV, proudly brought to you by Christchurch's #1 dining offer, Sequoia 88 at the Redwood Hotel, a food concept unequalled. Good evening. Homeopaths, psychics, they've all been targets of the Skeptics Society. Who's next? Outspoken skeptic Vicky Hyde is my guest, and Lynched starts right now. Good evening, thanks so much for joining us. Well, we live in a world where free speech is part of our democracy, don't we? But when does it become just too dangerous? Well, think about this. A Green MP a couple of weeks ago was urging us to use alternative stuff like homeopathy remedies to cure Ebola. Yep, can you believe it? Nutcase. And psychic Deb Webber is coming back to Christchurch to talk to the dead. But is it their right to make these extraordinary claims? Well, well-known skeptic Vicky Hyde is here to discuss this, and welcome to you.
Hello there.
Nice to have you in the program. Now, there's a reason why we are standing, because shortly you are going to explain to me, I think for the first time on local, but even perhaps New Zealand television, the principles of homeopathy. But before we explain this, we'll let the audience know exactly why we've got these glasses here. Is it dangerous? Is there a point where free speech becomes too dangerous?
People can make extraordinary claims, but if they're going to do that, particularly if they're flogging off their latest performances or their latest products, then they should provide extraordinary proof as well, so that we know that maybe they have actually found the amazing proof of life after death, or the amazing ability to cure all our ills with a coffee enema. But if we're going to put our money or our mouth or other parts where these people want us to, then they have to provide proof that they're actually doing what they say they're doing.
Well, let's just touch on that. Homeopathy, for example. We had the Green MP that came out and said that, and signed an online petition saying, come on guys, give homeopathy a go as a cure for Ebola. Many people, and I would imagine including yourself, took great exception to that, including me. For people who don't know exactly homeopathy, how would you describe it? I'm going to make this hard for you, Vicky, in a sentence.
Dilutions of grandeur.
Dilutions of grandeur.
It's often described as materials that are diluted in a special way. Now, what a lot of people don't realise is that no homeopathic product, pure homeopathic product, contains any active ingredient, because it's been diluted right to the point way, way, way beyond of any chance of any single molecule remaining.
Let me get this right. On Talkback the other day, had a few homeopath diehard fans call up and say it works, water's got a memory. What were they? I couldn't quite work out what they were meaning by that.
Well, there is this belief, for example, that the dilutions don't matter so much because if you bang the water, it will remember what was in it. Now, how it remembers that it had, say, for example, vomit or pus or any of the herbs that homeopaths use, they use these kinds of materials, is questionable, because you have to say, well, it's also had other things in it, like beer and urine and all kinds of stuff. How does it remember? There is no physical demonstration that has ever been done to suggest water has a memory.
And now, recently, probably one of your members wrote to the Advertising Standards Authority with some complaints, and you can probably see this on the camera, about this stuff called no jet lag. Long haul for flights longer than 7 hours, homeopathic remedy.
Yep.
And basically, he was annoyed because the chemist was marketing this product as something that actually works.
Yep.
The Advertising Standards Authority came back and said, it's bunkum mad, don't remove it. But what actually happened to that outcome? Because that was I think that was almost set a precedent, didn't it?
Well, the problem is that a lot of the pharmacies will actually sell these products because they're popular. People want them, and of course they're popular because they're seen as natural, they're seen as alternative, they're seen as organic, they're seen as friendly, they're seen as no side effects.
So what is in this stuff?
What they're not seen as is not effective, not medicine. What is in that stuff? That one I think is tablets. They have various sort of ones where
But Vicky, that's the perfect travelling companion.
Yes, indeed. So is diarrhea.
I don't think it's the perfect companion to describe.
I mean, there are claims of a whole pile of homeopathic ingredients here diluted to 30 times. The thing that the skeptics take issue with, particularly with pharmacists stocking this sort of stuff, is it gives a kind of imprimatur of it being a real medicine. And you have to ask the question is, if the pharmacist is the health professional you see most often, what should worry you more? The fact that your health professional doesn't understand basic chemistry enough to know that this is a placebo, a sham product.
You call that a sham?
I would call the homeopathic approach to health by claiming that water has a medicine, water has a memory, shambolic.
If people want to believe this stuff, though, is it their fundamental right?
It's their fundamental right, but we have fought a long time with orthodox medicine to have this notion of informed consent. Now, the problem that we find with homeopathic products is there isn't informed consent because 94% of people using homeopathic products, going into their pharmacy or going to their alternative health provider and buying it, don't understand what the dilutions actually mean. 94% of people are under the misleading impression that they're actually getting something in a concentrated form because they pick up these packages and they see something on the back that says 30C or 10X and they think, oh, there's 10 times the amount here, that must be good for me, or this must mean something. The Homeopathic Council of New Zealand has actually admitted there are no active ingredients in homeopathic products.
So if there are no active ingredients in any of the stuff that you probably call rubbish then, how on earth in this country, New Zealand, are we allowed to sell this stuff as something that helps with, what, jet lag, different relief pain? How can chemists, how can supermarkets, how can the entire retail industry get away with it? Because essentially what you're saying is it's complete and utter false advertising.
Well, some people say because it's a free country we can do this. There aren't many regulations when it comes to these kinds of products. There have been attempts, for example, even to keep homeopathic products out of what little regulation there is, to the point of, for example, not requiring them to have labelling which says no active ingredients, which we think would be a good start, just to make sure that people who are buying it understand that they're paying about $10 a teaspoon for these kinds of products, which when you have a standard sports bottle will be about $1,000 for a bottle of water. I mean, that's even more expensive than French mineral water. $1,000 for a bottle of water if you buy it on homeopathic lines.
I think it's important to make the distinction for the folks at home, the difference between things like St John's worts and some of the other slightly more medicine-y stuff, because as we were saying off here, you're saying to me, slightly different because there is some active ingredients, like they say for that not to be used with certain medication, for example.
Yep.
Is that because it has got something in it, some principles that does work?
You're talking about an entirely different practice.
Right.
Herbalism. We know that there are active components in herbs. I mean, that's where we got aspirin from. They came from willow bark, for example. There's a whole pile of active components in our own native trees, which are understood or being teased out from rongoa, Māori medicine, through to products that could actually be used pharmacologically. So St John's wort, yes, it was a well-known one, and it became quite notorious because people were taking it as a herbal medicine and not telling their doctors they were taking it. And unfortunately, because it is actually pharmacologically active, they were getting some nasty interactions between that and some of the orthodox prescription medicine that they were taking. Homeopathy always says it has no side effects, and that's true. That's because you're drinking water, or possibly with a little bit of alcohol in it.
I want you to explain that to the folks at home. After the break, you are going to demonstrate the principles of homeopathy, where like means like, and where the more you dilute something, the stronger and more effective it is. Stay with us. Welcome back to Lynched on CTV. My guest tonight is skeptic Vicky Hyde. If you're wondering why we're standing, no, we're not about to go and sell you something, are we? Although I suppose we could actually, homeopathic remedies.
No, we won't.
Why we're standing? Because I want you, Vicky Hyde, I think for the first time on television, to explain the basic principles of homeopathy, because I've asked many people on the radio, on various media sites, can you explain to me the principles of homeopathy? All I get was, water has a memory, like means like, and the more you dilute something, the stronger it is. So you've got a very nice demonstration for us. So in that glass there is what is that? It's coffee, isn't it? We've put in some nice cold coffee for you. So what are you going to do? What are you going to try and demonstrate here, Vicky? No pressure.
You mentioned the idea of like versus like, and
yes.
homeopathic principles go back to about the 1700s when Hahnemann first came up with these ideas, and now it's been expanded out into a huge multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide. And the like versus like thing is something like, for example, they thought that a little bit of something that causes symptoms would counteract symptoms that you might have that need curing.
That's right.
So, for example, caffeine is one where it causes you to stay awake. So in this particular case, it's actually used as an insomnia preparation in some respects.
But that makes no sense.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
My favourite one is oysters. Oysters are used to treat constipation because oysters tight and hold on tight to a rock. And therefore
This is a family show, Vicky Hyde.
you use ground oyster shell, for example. But the main thing about homeopathy, which people need to know, is that it involves massive dilutions, right down to incredible, vast amounts of dilutions. So we've got a demonstration here.
All right, we'll take it away then.
Right. So what we do is we take a drop.
So that's a nice drop of cold coffee.
Full drop of cold coffee, and we put one drop into here.
All right.
Right. And if I was doing this properly, I'd have a clean pipette for everything, but you'll be
nice
doing
sound
this on the
effects from
cheap.
Gordon there. It's very nice.
Okay, so we hit on here. Now, homeopaths believe that you need to succuss the fluid, and that involves doing this: bang, 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 shake, shake, shake,
Right.
shake, shake. It depends on which kind of
So you're now
homeopath you are.
shaking the fluid, right?
Yes, it's called succussion, right? And
right.
the idea is that that imprints the coffee into that water, and then we take a drop of. No, I've already contaminated it. It's terrible. We take a drop.
Of the diluted substance.
Of the diluted substance, and we put it into here.
Right.
Right?
And what have you? And what? Here.
And then we do shake, shake, bang,
Right.
bang, round,
Give
round.
it a
Right?
shake.
That's 1 in 10,000 already. Right? What's known as 2C. Right?
2C.
2C. Now we take a drop from here,
Mm.
and we put that drop in there. And I'll just do a quick succussion. Quick.
Yeah.
Okay, then we take a drop from here, and we put a drop in there. And we do a quick succussion.
So as you do this, you really are diluting.
Oh, you're diluting it
Your
massively.
cold
Wait till we
coffee.
get down to here, yes. Yeah, you'll notice it's not getting browner, is it?
No.
And most people who know how to make a gin and tonic will realise that the less gin you put in and the more tonic you put in, the less interesting your drink is.
You, in fact, were at Cathedral Square before the earthquakes. You did a public display where you tried to overdose on homeopathy remedies.
Yes.
What happened to you, Vicky? You're okay?
We were perfectly fine. There's no side effects to homeopathy because it's no active ingredients.
But hang on, so nothing happened.
Nothing happened, no.
And what did you take?
Oh, we took
What was it supposed to
entire
help?
boxes of pills and tablets and nasal sprays and everything just to demonstrate. And of course, that was when the New Zealand Council of Homeopaths came out and said, of course you wouldn't overdose, there's no active ingredients. And we went, gotcha.
Hello?
And for the first time ever, a recognised body of homeopaths actually actively admitted in the media there are no active ingredients in homeopathic products. So hang on, down here, we're just on the 6 times,
Under
right?
6C, right?
Now, that's
Yes.
got 1 million, 1 to 1 million.
Yeah.
That's equivalent to putting a drop in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Right.
20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. That's a lot of water.
That's a lot of,
That's
yes.
for anybody, even Michael Phelps, to get through. Okay, so we continue on with this. Yeah, the overdose, we tried an underdose as well, because in homeopathic parlance, of course, the more you dilute it,
I better give it a shake.
the
actually.
stronger
I
it
think
is. Yeah, you
it's
give it a
nice, isn't
shake.
it? So what do you want me to do, just like that?
Yep. And some factories actually have little leather-clad pads that they bang their things up and down on. Which one was that? That was.
You got to keep going, Vicky.
I got to keep going. Yeah. And we put one drop in there.
So as we go
bang,
along
bang,
here-
bang.
This is insane. So can somebody in any land explain to me how a homeopathic doctor, remedy, whatever person you call them, this is what they do?
Yep.
How can they possibly believe the more you die? Look, we're only halfway, and what are we up to
We're
now?
up to Avogadro constant, which at
How
least
can a homeopathy person seriously believe they're doing a service to the community by diluting this stuff?
Oh, well, I suspect that many of them don't actually understand the basic chemistry. I mean, Avogadro's constant is something you encounter, I think, in around about year 10, 11 these days. That's the one which says that the odds on there's no caffeine, no coffee molecules in this at all.
This defies
whatever.
scientific reasoning. This defies the laws of physics.
But the people who are flogging this off, and it's a huge industry, a massive industry. Where are we up to here?
Where are we up to now? Let's
We're
have
up
a
to
look.
here.
Right.
The people who are flogging this stuff off are making quite a nice living out of it, thank you very much, and they don't need to have
So it's
scientific
money-making, isn't
belief
it?
as far as they're
Yeah,
concerned.
if that was a glass of Ebola and we got to the very end here, I'd be quite comfortable drinking that glass there.
Yep.
This little glass here. Thank you, Andy. I mean, this is beyond belief, Vicky Hyde.
Yeah, I mean, it's people don't. The thing that I find absolutely appalling is that 94% of people in New Zealand who buy these products aren't aware of this dilution.
So are we saying, by the time we get, hang on, so if we get to the very end here, this is going to cure me of caffeine something, isn't it? Because you've just put caffeine in the end there. So if I've got any caffeine issues, I'm going to be cured, aren't I?
Well, yes.
What do you reckon? What do you reckon the chances are, Vicky? You're going to solve my... life story?
Where am I up to here? No. Well, see, the thing is that homeopathic products and services are similar to many other alternative health services in that they exploit the body's ability to actually get better by itself and to heal itself. The human body is amazing. It can do all sorts of incredible things, and most things that ail us will get better within 3 days, whether we take an aspirin, whether we take a homeopathic preparation, wave a crystal over our head, or dance naked under the full moon, because that's just how our body works. For things that are really serious, like Ebola and broken legs and meningitis and typhoid, you don't tend to hear about alternative products because they are demonstrably non-working. And so it's really quite a concern when people sort of start to say things like, well, what's the harm about alternative medicine? Well, it can be very harmful when people take alternative medicine and don't actually get round to getting real medicine or real help when they can. And there have been court cases and coroner cases over this kind of stuff. There's a really good website called whatstheharm.net. And it's really
I've heard of that, yeah.
If you want to find out what sort of harm is caused by alternative health practices or by psychics or by breatharians or all sorts of the other weird and wonderful things that are out there, go and look at whatstheharm.net, and it tracks cases around the world where people have died or have been economically exploited.
Let's have a look at that.
Or physically exploited.
Do you know what I like about this demonstration? You're doing it very carefully.
Well, I'm trying to remember which one I'm up to.
Yeah, this is
Here we go, at the end.
I'm bored
Ta-da!
now. The variant zero. So if we get the cameras to do a nice pan from the coffee, the original coffee glass, right to the very end here, we can actually get a sense of just how much it simply is diluted. So let's get. So
Now,
let's.
can you say that number for me?
No, I'm not even going to try. So look at this. So we're looking at the camera here. So that's from the coffee. You've diluted it. So every time you take a little drop from one drop, you put into another drop, you put into another wee container, another container, another container, until we get right to the very end here. And what do we've got? We have got the diluted substance, which is known as the homeopathy principle.
Yep, that's 30C. So
Cheers.
these are what's known as centesimal dilutions. So we're now at the 1 to 1 with 60 zeros behind it.
You know what?
Which is a number we can't say, can we?
Being serious for a second though, as you've done this experiment on the Lynched program, I'm actually starting to feel offended. Not by you, because I think you're great, but by the fact that we've got people in this country that use this principle and say you're going to be cured of your ailments. It makes its
Well, they're
biggest
exploiting
belief.
people. I mean, that's a concern. They're exploiting people, and occasionally they will exploit people who really genuinely do need the help of orthodox medicine, and who will forgo that help in favour of taking this, and who end up as coroner's cases.
And
that's appalling.
and that is appalling, and that is the danger. I'm glad you've raised awareness on this program today. Well, still to come, you may know her as the psychic from programs like Sensing Murder. She's back in Christchurch to talk to the dead. Well, is there any harm in that? Vicky Hyde explains her concerns next. Welcome back to Lynched on CTV. Well, coming to a town near you, or a venue I suppose, is Deb Webber, the self-proclaimed psychic. She can talk to the dead people. You'll remember, you know that name. She used to be on, what was it, Sensing Murder. Vicky Hyde, she's back in Christchurch shortly, and I have great reservations about her and other psychics. I've seen her live in Greymouth. I've seen Calvin Cruikshank live as well. I was absolutely amazed at how wonderfully they perform. They are nothing more than actors. In my view, they will claim they're not, but what do you see in what they do? Is there anything wrong in what they do?
I think they are also exploiting very vulnerable people with basic psychological tricks and manipulations. I mean, they may not recognise that that's what they're doing, but nonetheless, it's the sort of thing which you can learn in terms of what's known as cold reading. How to put together a string of platitudes and fairly banal statements, how to respond to people's body language, particularly how to get information out of people. And you can pick this up unconsciously working on the psychic circuit, or you can actually learn it and be taught it. Very clearly there are psychics out there who have been caught absolutely lying and milking their audiences and using technology, for example, to appear to have amazing powers.
Deb Webber, for example, when I saw her in Greymouth, I think we've got some footage of her, she was very impressive. She was an absolute showman. She had charisma. She oozed charm. She was likeable.
Well, you have to be in that industry to survive.
These are all the things that you're right. But also, in my view, she was an actor because what she did was cold reading. She would go around, she picked up some old Doris from the audience who said, your grandfather's with me. Well, the chances of an elderly person's grandfather being dead are pretty high, wouldn't you say?
Yes, indeed.
Tell us about some of the other techniques that psychics like Deb Webber use to influence the outcome.
Well, there's all sorts of things. We typically see psychics throwing out names or even initials, saying, you know, does the name John have a meaning for you? Well, for most people, they'll know a John, and even if it isn't a dead John, they'll say, oh, right, well, you know, it's somebody who's close to you anyway. I saw one psychic who got so desperate when somebody denied knowing anybody with an initial that started with M. He'd gone through Margaret and Mary and Martha. No. The psychic suddenly went, Mum, it's your mum! And it was just such a pathetic attempt to try and make what's called a miss into a hit. And people will remember the hits. You remember the things that they say that sound really amazing, and you supply them with the information. Common things like, they'll say things like, your person who's passed on, there's something to do with needles, and it's guaranteed that the person will say they were in hospital when they died, or they were a great knitter if it was a grandma, or a whole host of things. They will interpret.
So the interpretation's open so wide.
Very open.
Look, we're nearly out of time. But for those who are believers of people like Deb Webber, what should they actually look out for when they see the performance? Because I know there's almost like a checklist you've presented in the past, which I've looked at myself, and it was absolutely 100% spot on.
Well, they can certainly get the checklist. It's available on the resources section of the New Zealand Skeptics website at skeptics.org.nz. But really, they should just treat it as entertainment and not allow themselves to be exploited into paying $250 for a half-hour private reading session, or the sorts of exorbitant charges that these people use to exploit those who are vulnerable and hoping that their dead relatives are out there somewhere.
Because obviously they go there sadly with the intention of trying to speak to their loved ones from the other side. And what I found quite sad was many of them volunteered the information to the so-called psychic. Many said such and such, you know, for example, I think Calvin at one stage said, oh, your dad's with me. He was a bit of a joker, wasn't he? He's laughing, he was cheeky, wasn't he? I mean, how often would you say your dad was a bit cheeky at times or had a good sense of humour?
And how often would you admit in front of an audience, no, he was a sour old griper all the time and never cracked a smile in his life? You wouldn't say that in front of an audience of 300 people who are all wanting the same thing. They're wanting to believe. They're wanting to sort of have this kind of things. But you imagine, if there was proof of life after death, it would be such an earth-shattering global consequence that these psychics should be front page on the New York Times. And this is what I often say to reporters who ring me up and say, we've got a psychic who said such and such. Great, sell your story to the New York Times. Do you think you'll get it past the editor? And there's this long silence because they know that it's just another performance, really.
But is anything wrong if people go there wanting some sort of hope? And I saw a lot of tears and I felt really sorry for them. If they come out of that performance, and I call it a performance on purpose, feeling their loved one spoken to them, what are your thoughts on that?
It's still called exploitainment. And some of the nastiest things I've ever seen have been people like Sylvia Brown, for example, who have sat there and flatly told people the wrong things and then denied their own reality and their own experience in order to force their professional opinion upon them. And that's just absolutely appalling. And it's very sad that, again, you go back to whatstheharm.net, there's a whole section there on psychics and mediums who've told people that their kids are dead when they've been missing and they've turned up 10 years later, thanks. They've told others that their kids have been sold off into prostitution in Japan when they were murdered as soon after they were taken from their home. All these sorts of things that were gut-wrenching and mind-changing and highly emotionally charged, they are taking that in their hands and they are manipulating that for psychological gain, for economic gain, and I think for their own egos. And I think that's an appalling way to make a living.
For anybody considering going to see Deb Webber when she comes to Christchurch, who wants to believe, what's your message for them?
I think keep your ears open. If you can, record it, have a listen to it afterwards and see if what you thought was so amazing at the time really was amazing. Because it's so easy to be fooled. You don't have to be foolish to be fooled. You just have to want to be fooled. And sometimes, you know, our minds deceive us into thinking we're seeing real powers there which aren't there at all. It would be wonderful if somebody could actually talk to people in the afterlife and reassure us all that there is somewhere to go on to. But we have not seen any evidence of that at all, ever.
A real pleasure to meet you and thank you for being on Lynched. Vicky Hyde, everybody from Skeptics NZ. Check out the website, it's absolutely brilliant. And thank you for joining me on tonight's special program. Have a great night. Lynched on CTV was proudly brought to you by Christchurch's #1 dining offer, Sequoia 88, at the Redwood Hotel, a food concept unequalled.